Howdy, friends, and welcome to the StoryField. This is a podcast where we talk about business, faith, and life in general.
Okay, so here's the deal. We want you to be encouraged. We want you living in hope. This life we live is complex. It's hard at times. At the StoryField, you will find great stories of normal people just like us who will inspire you. Our goal is that you leave encouraged, inspired, and excited to move forward in life. But before we get started, one thing though, if you're listening and you find yourself really hopeless right now, send us an email at hope@thestoryfield.com so we can pray for you. Thanks for joining us today. Let's get started. Welcome, Dr. Alan Williams, to the show. We were just talking beforehand. We're really excited because Dr. Williams is really going to be our first amazing ag story. You know, he's a believer with a fantastic story, and I really do think today is going to be super powerful for what you have done and what you know and what we're going to hopefully get from you today. So, Dr. Williams, man, thank you for making time.
Well, it's a pleasure, and I'm honored to be able to be here with y'all.
Good. So we are located, Alan, in Central Texas. I am. Mike is in the Austin area, and it's a really big ag area.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of cattlemen, a lot of dairies where I'm at. And today I'm hoping, I think my real heart is I'm hoping that you can open some eyes and introduce folks to in this area and the people who listen to us to things you've learned about I'm just gonna say regen ag, but regenerative ag, things that can completely change lives. And even the environment and our farms forever for good. So, but first, I wanted to give a short bio on you, but then I want you to introduce yourself as well because, you probably will glass over some of this, and I want to make sure the listeners know. So, you are a pioneer in the grass-fed beef and regenerative and ag food sector. You worked with thousands of farmers. Ranchers covering that I saw 50 million plus acres in over 45 countries. You're a farmer and a food marketer, again, regenerative. I'm not saying that right. You're gonna have to help me on that. And then you're an ag and a food consultant in this regen ag area. So multiple businesses. You have a PhD from LSU in genetics and reproductive physiology. You have an MS at Clemson, animal science and genetics. So I think it's safe to say, and you're prolific author of 400 peer-reviewed articles all on this area. So I think it's safe to say, like, you are, from the public's eye, really an expert in all this area, and that's what I want to focus on today. So introduce yourself now the way you would do it. But I just wanted to get that on the record. So,
Well, I appreciate that, Josh. I first and foremost, I'm a sixth generation family farmer and rancher. And that heritage has an awful lot to do with why I do what I do today, because I really value the heritage and the ability of families to bring their children and their grandchildren back to the farm, back to the ranch. And I think almost anybody in agriculture today knows that's becoming increasingly harder to do, right? And I don't want it to be that way, and it should not be that way. That has led me on a lifelong journey, to be able to first make sure that we are good and worthy stewards of the land and of God's creation. To me, that's just incredibly important. And we can talk about this today, but I have to be very honest and very blunt about this. We have forgotten how to be really good stewards. I think we just know that we have deep inside. Yeah. And, but I think oftentimes we fool ourselves. Yeah. And we're fooling ourselves more and more today in today's world. about what being a good steward is really all about. So my story is really one of my journey of stewardship and learning how to be a good steward and learning from the very copious mistakes I've made along the way. I'll be the very first to admit that I've probably made every mistake in the book. But trying hard to learn from those. Um, so I call this a journey of stewardship. So regenerative agriculture is really a journey of stewardship. And I have a good friend of mine that we talk scripture all the time,
Yeah.
early mornings. His name is Sam Bass, but Sam loves to call this redemptive agriculture
Uh,
instead of regenerative agriculture. And I really I can't argue that. I think he's exactly right. It is redemptive agriculture. But we to the world we call it regenerative agriculture.
yeah.
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 So I spent a number of years in academia. 15 years as a researcher and professor, and I was a tenured full professor when I just saw the fallacy of what was going on and had to make a decision, to be very honest with you. Do I continue? So I'm 15 years in, fully vested. I'm tenured, all of this. So in that world, you sort of have it made, right?
Oh, right. I mean, time out for a second, Alan. Was your dad and your family still farming at that point, at the time you were in school, and you kind of went off into the academia world, and then you have this big transition moment, which I love because I know the Lord's all involved in that. But yeah, tell us what happened. That's a big jump. I mean, that's a big, big risky jump. So we love those stories.
Yeah, really over the course of so I was in college 9 years, to get the bachelor's, master's, and PhD. So, my family began to call me a professional student.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially coming
And
from a farming background, you're like,
and there's a lot of truth in that. But during the 15 years after that I was, a university researcher and professor, it was sort of a gradual realization. There was no one big aha moment or anything like that. And I think God often works that way, right?
yeah,
It's gradual and it's subtle. But it was a gradual realization that much of the research that we were doing, the products and technologies and everything else that we were developing, and all of those peer-reviewed publications that I had really weren't moving the needle. you
mm,
know, um, and rather what I began to realize was that our soil was not getting better.
mm,
It was getting more and more degraded, and our cropping systems were becoming more reliant on external inputs, to be able to successfully grow crops. The same thing in the livestock. Our livestock weren't getting better. They weren't getting healthier. None of that. And instead, we were becoming more and more reliant on inputs, purchased
mm,
inputs and technologies. And but even more than that, I began to realize that our farm economies were eroding,
mm,
that farmers and ranchers were losing real equity, were increasingly getting into deeper and deeper debt, and that it was becoming, as I mentioned earlier, much harder to be able to viably bring kids and grandkids back home. Yeah, and,
mm,
and they had no desire because they watched their parents struggle, their grandparents struggle.
mm,
And so I don't want that kind of life.
mm,
Um, and and I call this a full circle moment because at that point in time, I then began thinking about my own family
mm,
and the six generations
mm,
and how did my family do it for all of that time since 1840 on that piece of ground that I grew up on? How did they support families? And the farm never was a single family, okay? It was always multiple families. So For instance, when I was growing up, my parents, my grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, all of this, right? So the farm for 6 generations had supported multiple families,
Wow.
multiple generations. There were almost always 4 generations alive on the farm, at any given point in time for all of that time. And they did it without all of the stuff that we now believe we have to have, right?
And
Because
you
it did
call
make
that
sense.
it, yeah. And so I'm gonna ask you to several times during our interview, at least, like to okay, talk to me. I'm not a I'm not an expert farmer in the knowledge. When you say all the stuff and all the inputs, you're talking about the extra fertilizers and the sprays and all the stuff that you have to add in order to produce now. Okay. So that's what you're talking about. This farm was operating without all these like extra inputs and stuff. Okay.
Yeah, synthetic fertilizers did not come about till right after World War II.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
and all the nitrogen, the synthetic nitrogen, phosphorus, all of this that we use now, they were they were utilized initially during World War I and World War II, for the making of ordnance,
Okay.
and bombs and things like that. So they were used for warfare, not for agriculture. They got transitioned over to the use in agriculture after World War II,
Okay.
right?
But what you were recognizing though, back to the farm is
Yep,
this thing was sustaining 4 or 5 families,
right,
generations
right.
without any of that stuff.
Without
Wow.
the synthetic fertilizers, without the herbicides, the insecticides, the fungicides, all of these other things, without all of the supplements and pharmaceuticals that we're using in the livestock sector now, and that we believe that we just
Mm,
absolutely have to have, and there's no way to get along without them, right?
wow.
And
Wow.
and I began to ask myself as this, PhD, researcher and all of this, supposed to be on the cutting edge of everything. How did we get here? How did
Wow.
we get here that we now believe we have to have all this stuff, all these products, all these inputs, and yet mankind has been making a living in agriculture for thousands
With
of years,
without all that.
without all of it. And
Oh,
just all of a sudden, now we need it and we can't get along without it. Yeah.
and that conflict was just going on inside you in a big way after all your schooling and all your education and your research. Oh man. Oh, so what happened? What actually led to you? Did you just jump out of academics? I mean, in that world? Oh my
Did.
gosh. What happened? What led up to that? I mean, all this was leading up to it. What was the point where it's just like I got to do it?
Well, again, 15 years in, and I'm like, okay, I either do another 15 and then I can retire, full retirement, da da da, everything else, or get out now. Yeah. And I was 40 at the time. Okay.
Oh, he probably had kids and in the
Oh,
middle of
yeah.
like, oh,
Oh, yeah.
oh
Well,
my
and
gosh.
our youngest son had just been born.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So, yeah, it was one of these deals that, what do I do? And so I had guaranteed salary, guaranteed benefits, all of that. And with the newborn in the house, do I leave it all behind?
And they don't look too favorably on you trying to if you jumped out and then wanted to come back. Like there's not a lot of second chances in that, especially when you're tenured and all the way. Oh, okay, yeah. So
No, and
this
I
is a
I was even told by my department head, when I told him I was leaving that, and he tried hard to talk me out of it, but he told me that, well, if you leave, you won't be able to get back in. And I
wow.
asked him, I said, well, why is that? And he said, you'll be way too behind. You'll be way too behind on the research and everything else and the knowledge. And I said, so you're telling me that if I leave and I get out here and farm and ranch and that my real world experience has no value in academia.
Mm,
He didn't have an answer to that. He didn't answer that.
yeah.
Um, but essentially, yes, that's the case. Real world experience doesn't have a lot of latitude in academia, and that's the truth.
Yeah.
Um, so what I tell people today with all the peer-reviewed publications and everything else that I had is don't go look any of them up and read them. Don't bother
Mm,
because they're not going to advance anything. They're not going to help you as a real farmer, real rancher. I left the university in February of 2001.
wow.
So it's been 26 years now, since I left. And what I will have to say is that, yes, it was a agonizing and even at times terrifying decision to make. Um, and it was fully stepping out on faith because I had nothing else,
Yeah.
to rely on. Um, what I can say is to this day, I've never gone hungry. I've never
Yeah.
not paid my bills. You know, God has provided. And I've been able to do things far beyond anything I ever could have done within the confines of academia in the university world. I've been able to travel many different places in the world. I've been able to be on literally thousands and thousands of farms and ranches all over the world. I've worked in all 50 U.S. states and, and of course, dozens of countries in continents around this globe. And I've been able to see things that most people have never been able to see. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
That sounds like
yeah.
God's plan. Yeah.
Well, I actually call my academic years my Moses in the desert
Yeah.
years. Okay. He had to do the 40 years in the desert before he was prepared to, lead the nation of Israel out of Egypt. And I feel like that my years in academia, they weren't wasted, and I don't view them that way. They were an incredible learning experience, and they helped forge, you know, what I do today,
Yeah.
just not like the people in academia would think.
Yeah.
Well,
It's made you who you are. Yeah. Go ahead,
well, and
Michael.
I
Sorry.
think that's so interesting that like you would think that all the academia, the all of them, the time you spend doing these research and all these other things, that that's what you should do is go back out into the real world and see how those things actually can be used if it actually is worth it because you can do a little miniature thing on your university campus at a small scale, but then you get into the bigger farms and all these other stuff, and there's no way that's going to work because in real life you have all these other things that you have to deal with. So I think that's just amazing that you were able to take all this knowledge you did in 15 years and now you're like, yeah, I'm gonna go see what it's like in the real world
Yeah.
and continue this generational. I just think that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, okay. So I do want to end up, today with really some tips and basic stuff, but can you start us? Because, I mean, it's sad for me to admit, but this is a little bit how ignorant I've been. And once I've got a taste and hearing some of this stuff, I find so much hope and excitement in it and how much, but I'm not from a farming family and all that. Like I think I might have mentioned, we have a small orchard and some land and some cows that I would love to try a bunch of stuff. But a lot of people, I'm assuming, are like me and have no idea
Mhm.
what you're even talking about when you say regenerative ag or redemptive ag and all that. And I love God's plan and all this and like how did God do it and all this stuff. So I love the combination of what He's done through you. But can you start us from some pretty basics as if we don't know what you're talking about when you're talking about this term and what does that mean? And then let's just kind of walk through. I do want to talk about like the problems with soil and dirt and I don't want to harp on it forever, but you have a lot of message of hope too, which is what I love about you. So can you start as if you're talking to two non-farmers
Mhm.
who don't know what you're talking about, but know a lot of friends who do this and want to like, try to be a message of hope for people to consider this stuff?
Hey, y'all. I just want to make an observation. When I see someone going through a legal situation, it seems like there are way too many unknowns. Well, the Allen firm provides legal guidance so that you can make a great decision, come to a resolution, and be at peace. For more information about the Allen firm, visit allenlawfirm.com.
Yeah, so let me start with my definition for regenerative agriculture. Uh, so I define it like this. It is farming and ranching in synchrony with nature to repair, rebuild, revitalize, and restore ecosystem function, starting with life within the soil and expanding to life above. Now, that last part of that definition is critical because that's the part we forgot. Okay. And especially over the last 100 years, over the last century, that is the part we have forgotten. We treat soil like it is lifeless, like it's just some structure that holds plant roots and that everything needed for the plant to grow and produce and thrive has to be applied over top, right?
Okay.
So, when we go all the way back to Genesis chapters 1 and 2, what do we find? You know, when God created this earth, number one, he created the soil, but what does he say about that soil? That soil is full of life. Okay. And it's so full of life that he took that same soil to create us,
Yeah.
right? So essentially, the exact same life that's in the soil
Mm.
is also the life that is in us. And today, we actually work with a lot of medical professionals as well. And what we have found conclusively in the research is that the healthiest human beings are those that have the same microbiome in their gut that is found in healthy soil.
Wow. Oh my.
That's how God did it in the
Yeah.
very beginning, guys. Okay. And then we're the ones that totally blew all that up, you know. So everything's got to be in synchrony with what he set in motion with nature here. And I hear a lot of farmers, and I've heard this for a long time now, talk about fighting nature, fighting the land. You have to
Hmm.
fight the land to be successful. No, that's how you're grossly unsuccessful. To be successful, you have to work with the land. And there's a quote that I use practically every time I speak anywhere, even do field sessions, by W.C. Loudermilk in his book, Conquest of the Land Through 7,000 Years. And the quote goes like this: "The land does not lie.
Hmm.
It bears a record of what we write on it, a record that is easy to read by those who understand the simple language of the land." So, in essence, our management of the land is written on the tapestry of the land.
Hmm.
You know, if we're good stewards, this I can guarantee you, okay? Guarantee you. If we are good stewards, good things happen.
Wow.
When we're poor stewards, that's when bad things happen. And this is played out over and over again in Scripture, particularly with the nation of Israel, right?
Hmm.
We
Yeah.
see it when they were obedient, which also means they were obedient as stewards, not just obedient in terms of not worshiping false gods and all of this, right? But also obedient in terms of being good stewards, because obedience encompasses everything.
Yeah.
Okay. So when they were obedient, then what does Scripture tell us over and over? The land thrived. There was abundance. You
Yeah.
know, pestilence and disease went away. All of those types of things. The populations expanded. But when they were disobedient, which also means they disobeyed the command to be good stewards of the land, then we saw pestilence, drought, famine, all of those things occurring. And so it's the same today, y'all.
Mm.
And this is what we are personally witnessing and testifying to is that every time we take a piece of land, a degraded piece of land, and we return good stewardship to it, it thrives. And we don't have to
Yeah.
have all the inputs and everything else to make it do that because the life that was originally put there is still there. Okay.
Wow.
So if we just simply do like we've been taught for a very long time,
Yeah.
you know, if we are just simply good stewards, that life will awaken again. It will become abundant again, and it will, and everything will thrive. We'll see diversity of everything, and then many species, birds, animals, and so forth that haven't been there will all of a sudden appear again because they find the appropriate habitat, and that is precisely what we have seen repeatedly.
That is to me so exciting and amazing and hopeful. It's like something you can do about it. And then I'm assuming it doesn't take ages and ages to return to that stewardship. And that's what want you to speak about it a little bit. So like I've heard you talk in the past too. Like, I mean, it's like we've almost turned our soil into dirt, which is lifeless dirt. So, if I'm hearing this and I'm a guy who wants to try some of this, I'm a farmer, I'm a rancher, I want to try some of this. Like, what does it mean to be a good steward? Like, how do I even start? Like, where do I even begin? Is this going to cost me a ton of money? Like that type of thing is kind of going through my head. Like, um, how do we start to do that? Because we want our land like that, you know?
So the first thing is education. You can't implement what you do not know, right?
Yeah,
Just as a Christian, we can't live according to biblical principles if we don't know those biblical principles.
yeah,
So we got to get into the word to know how to live according to what God is showing us in scripture. So this is the exact same thing. We've got to educate ourselves on the basic timeless principles of what we today call regenerative agriculture. And I'll give you those. There's basically six principles. I'll give them to you real quick.
okay,
Um, Number one is context. You have to know your context. Just like we have to read scripture within context, or we can easily misinterpret it and misconstrue it, right?
mm.
We have to know our context on our farms, on our ranches. Then the other five,
Meaning like where we're living, our environment, our that. Okay, gotcha.
where you're living, your environment, the history of the land,
Okay,
your enterprises, your production and profit goals, even the human dynamics,
okay,
right? Of you, your family, if you have employees, all of that. All of that is context.
okay,
You've got to identify it and understand it.
okay,
Okay.
gotcha.
Then the other five principles must be applied within that context. So every farm and every ranch has its own individual context. Now, I'll say one thing real quick about that, and then we'll get to the other five principles, is that that's something else we have forgotten today. We have tried to make agriculture generic, formulaic, prescriptive, as if every farm, every ranch is just the same. So just follow this prescription on every ranch, every farm, and you're good. And that's what has come about principally with the research and everything else we've been doing at our universities. And unfortunately, even with the USDA. Okay.
Yeah.
It's generic and prescriptive. That does not work in the real world, no
Yeah.
more so than us trying to apply something generic and prescriptive to us as individual human beings.
I mean, it doesn't work in the business world either. I mean, it just doesn't
No,
work anywhere. I mean, I
no.
look at your farm in Mississippi versus here's like, those are not the two same similar pieces of land. So why would the same things work? Yeah. I mean, that just makes sense, but
Well, and I
I
Yeah.
think
get,
it also goes to what Dr. Williams was talking about earlier about like God made us individually. Of course, He's going to make each patch of land individually, and then you got to kind
yeah,
of meld the two. So, yeah,
which is
makes sense.
exciting. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even our own our individual understanding of stewardship,
Yeah.
right, differs and plays a big role in that context. So if we first define context and I tell every client, write it down. We write it down and we pepper them with questions initially to be able to get at their context. Okay.
Well, take a brief start right here.
Yep.
Are you consulting under? Tell us about how they can reach you. I'm going to ask you again at
Yep.
the end, but how can they reach you if they say, "Yeah, I want to talk about this. I want to get some consulting." Who are you with? Who are you through? How do they reach you?
Yep. Yep. So our company is Libertas Land,
Okay.
and they can reach me at Allen, Allen,
Okay.
at radicallyregenerative.com.
Okay.
So Alan at radicallyregenerative.com. They could also reach me through our inquiries at our farm,
Okay.
at ETTA, EttaHillsFarm.com. So
Okay.
by the way,
We'll reference that. Thanks for taking a little sidebar on that. We'll put that on the show notes as well to make sure. So, yeah, I just want to ask you again, but like, because I want people to reach out. So first thing, contact. Let's get back to the six. I'm sorry.
absolutely. So then the other five, uh, are keep the soil armored or covered at all times. Bare soil is a problem. Bare soil has no insulation, no protection. It's like bare skin, right? In the hot sun. Will sunburn and sunburn badly if we stay out too long. And bare soil can, quote, sunburn. Okay.
But you see, I mean, that to me is the most
Yes.
like, golly, I see that everywhere. And when I heard y'all
Yes.
first saying, I was like, oh my gosh. And then we had a pretty good storm come through the other day, and our next door neighbor, had plowed the land up or tilled it for something. I just saw like massive amounts of just
Yep.
wind and soil just blowing everywhere. So that's an example of not armored, like it's not covered. So
And keep it covered, armored at all times.
okay,
And um, there's a whole multiplicity of reasons why, but bare soil routinely measures soil temperatures in bare soil at 120 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit.
wow,
Okay. The hottest I've measured soil, and this was on a center pivot in southern Idaho with an active corn crop growing, was 183 degrees.
wow,
Okay. Now, let's put this into perspective. Okay. I like my steaks medium rare. That means I pull them off the grill at about 135. Okay. And if I cook it more than that, I consider it to be overcooked.
mm,
Okay. So 183 degrees or even 140, 150, 160, we're literally, not figuratively, literally cooking our soil. We're baking
wow.
soil. And because the soil has life in it, that means we are killing the life in the soil every time we leave soil exposed and bare. Bare and
Mm.
exposed soil in the wintertime also allows that soil to get way too cold and likewise kills the life in the soil. Okay.
So
Then
our goal is to restore. I mean, just to keep people like our goal is to restore the soil. Okay, gotcha. Keep going. Yeah,
restore the life in the
the
soil.
life in the soil. Yeah,
Right, right.
and we're baking it and we're freezing it
We're
if when
baking
we
it
leave
and
it uncovered.
freezing it. Yeah, because we were without a cover, we have no insulation, we have no protection. But the other things that happen when the soil is not covered is erosion, right? And erosion happens in two principal ways: rain erosion, water erosion, right? From
Just
rainfall,
washing it off and
washing it off, and
okay.
then wind erosion, dust storms. And we're seeing more and more massive dust storms in the US now that are the same magnitude as the dust storms we saw in the 1930s Dust Bowl.
Yeah.
And soil should not wash away, soil should not blow away. That is always our fault. That's always the result of poor stewardship. Okay,
Yeah.
period. The third is minimize soil disturbance. And disturbing the soil can come through excess tillage, overgrazing, application of too much synthetics and chemicals, all of those types of things. So minimize soil disturbance. The fourth is living roots in the ground. Keep living roots in the ground year round. Okay. Even if I'm growing crops, that means I need to have cover crops in the ground in between my cash crops to keep
Yeah.
living roots in the ground. Those
And
living
be-
roots
because
shield and cover.
you're
Yep.
shield because you're armoring the by doing that.
Yes.
Okay.
And feeding the microbes.
Okay.
Okay. Because and see, this is why we know there was another reason we know there was intelligent design. Every plant produces root exudates that are specific to certain species of microbes in the soil and then feed those microbes in the soil. And then
Wow.
the plants producing and releasing these root exudates that feed the microbes then trigger the microbes to feed to, in return, capture minerals or elements in the soil to feed them back to the plant.
Oh my gosh.
So I call that the
Amazing.
world's oldest bartering system,
Wow.
right? The next, the fifth is diversity, diversity. And this is something we have gotten way away from in agriculture today. Monoculture, monoculture, and specialization has been the mantra
Does
of the
that mean
last 80
does that
years.
mean one type of crop? When you say
Right.
monoculture, just I'm doing one type
Monoculture
of
is a
crop.
single crop,
Okay.
like nothing but corn, nothing but soybeans,
Okay.
nothing but wheat, whatever the case may be, right? And we even do monoculture in livestock today. Many of our farms only have only dairy cattle, only beef cattle, only
Mm,
sheep, or only chickens, right? So we even do a lot of monoculture in livestock today. But diversity is critical. And when we look again in Genesis 1 and 2, God created incredible diversity, diversity. And he even commanded us to continue to build more and more diversity.
mhm.
Okay. We were given that charge. He gave us type and kind, and then essentially said, you now are going to be co creators with me,
Yeah.
and you are going to continue to expand from this type and kind that I gave you. You're going to be able to create, I'm giving you the latitude to create all kinds of breeds, all types of cultivars, all of this, right?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Williams, I got a question.
Yep.
We had a dairy farm in Illinois, and my grandpa, and this is now making sense to me, is because he would say, "Oh, we had 10 fields, and field two would do corn for 2 years, and then we couldn't use that field for corn for 2 years because we'd have to grow something else." So I'm guessing it's because corn takes up a certain amount of nutrients, and then you got to put some there that uses maybe some other nutrient in order to build that other nutrient back. That's kind of what you're talking about, right? Now, see, now it all makes sense
Hmm.
50 years later.
But I think he's also talking about like he would plant corn and something else all in the same field by
Yeah.
diversity, right?
Well, so there's multiple ways to achieve the diversity, but in back to what you were saying, Mike, about the corn on corn, and then you'd have to plant something else. So yes, part of it was because the corn plant required a certain nutrient profile, and then a different type of crop requires a different one. But it's even more than that. That monoculture corn plant, just corn, could only associate with a certain array of soil microbial species. And then all of the other soil microbes had to basically go dormant or go to sleep, so to speak, because they weren't being fed and supported. Okay. And so it even goes to the life in the soil, all right, not
Wow.
just the nutrients that the crops are taking up. But when we have diversity, now we're feeding a lot more of that life in the soil and a lot more diversity of species of life in the soil, and then everything functions a lot better. So there's two principal ways, Josh, to create diversity here in the same year. One is we can grow a monoculture crop like corn or soybeans or wheat, but either interseed before harvesting or immediately after harvesting, interseed a diverse cover crop, okay, a cover crop mix to add the diversity back, or interseed early in that cash crop, like the corn or the wheat.
Okay.
Interseed early on so that you have a cover crop growing with the cash crop.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So
Golly,
then
yeah.
the sixth principle is integration of livestock. And this is something that we have gotten away from in farming, where a lot of row crop farmers and even orchards and vineyards and everybody else think that they don't need livestock anymore. And they say they don't even want livestock anymore, you know. And we now have at least two generations of farmers that have farmed completely devoid of livestock. And they think livestock aren't necessary. But yet, throughout the history of this world, livestock were always an integral part of farming, growing our crops,
Mm.
because livestock restored the fertility.
Oh
Okay.
wow.
They provided the manure, the urine, the microbial shedding, everything else to be able to restore fertility to grow our crops. And guess what? Leviticus chapter 25 that talks about the sabbatical year, right?
Hmm.
And laying land fallow every 7 years to restore it. Well, guess what it says? So if we really read it contextually and we read every word there, and I've heard way too many churches and way too many preachers totally and grossly misinterpret
Mm.
this. But if particularly Leviticus 25 verses 6 and 7,
Mm.
okay, it states very specifically that in the seventh year, the sabbatical year, that no, we're not to plant or formally harvest, but we and even the foreigner, the alien, are supposed to glean from the fields to eat, right? Even though we didn't formally plant or harvest, we're just to glean as we need it. But it goes on to say one other thing, and this is critical, and it does not need to be overlooked or just cast aside as unimportant or just irrelevant, because nothing in Scripture, not even a single word, is
Mm.
irrelevant, right? It says the cattle and the beasts of the field are to eat of the fields, the crop fields, in the sabbatical year. You are to turn them into the crop fields in the sabbatical year. How many times have you heard it taught like that, guys? Very, very few.
Never.
Okay.
So why? So they can smash it down and eat it and all. I mean, I'm sure it's part of the plan. I mean, it is part of the plan, but
God knew.
yeah.
God knew. Look, guys, listen to me. I put the animals here for a reason.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you listening? I put them here
Mm.
for a reason, and I put them here for you to use them. They are your tool to provide diversity, to provide fertility, to provide microbial shedding, to
Wow.
provide hoof impact with the soil, to stimulate the microbes and the plants in the soil. That's why I put them there. They have a purpose beyond just feeding you, directly feeding you. They are there to help steward my creation. Otherwise, why would I go to the trouble of creating them?
Wow.
Okay?
That's so interesting. I was actually in. I've been taking the slow path in my Bible plan because I can't ever read it a year, and I just can't. It's too much for me when I try to do that. But I was in Leviticus 25 just recently. It's so funny you mentioned that, but I was looking at it from the lens of it talks about uh the orchard. So I'm at year 4 with mine, and it says in there something about like what hard not harvesting in year 4, but wait till year 5 or anyway. So I was like, asking the Lord about that. I still haven't got the answer because I'm like, this is my first year actually asked something I could produce, like I could actually harvest. So I'm like, I don't know what you want me to do here. I'm open to whatever, but like, that's pretty hard for the guys who've been waiting 5 years to get some fruit, and I haven't touched it with any outside anything, So, anyways,
But see,
you're
it
gonna make
needs
me go
animal
dig more.
impact.
Yeah.
And what we have found is we've gone into orchards that have become very stale, unproductive, and have become highly reliant on fungicides and insecticides and synthetic fertility and irrigation, and yet are still going downhill, okay, in spite of all of that. And we have returned livestock and diversity to those orchards. And it has taken these orchards that appeared stale and almost irretrievable, you
Yeah.
know, and it has totally transformed them to where these old stale orchards and these old stale trees are now once again coming back to life and are highly productive.
I
So
love
we've
that.
done the same in vineyards, and things like that. So this animal integration component is very scriptural, very biblical. And if you look, there if you look in Numbers, if you look in Joshua, you look in a number of other places, and what we find is that when God described how to establish cities, he was very specific about it. And a city was to be of a certain size, and they would have a certain amount of agronomic acres around that city to support
Wow.
that city, and a certain amount of pasture land. And he always talked about the pasture land, okay? A certain amount of pasture land to support the livestock. So he gave us the recipe, the formula for being able to establish cities that each individual city supports itself, right? So local food is his intention.
Yeah.
It's spelled out over and over in the Old Testament. Local food was always his intention, and he told us very clearly, just like he gave us, you know, accurately how to construct the ark, right? We have deep details on that, and he gave us deep details on how to construct the tabernacle and then the temple, you know, and the Ark of the Covenant and all of this. It's all there in detail. Well, he gave us the exact same detail for how to establish cities and for those cities to support themselves with local food production. And that's really where we need, if we want to have true security today, that's what we need to move back to is locally and regionally produced foods and farming and ranching systems, uh,
Wow.
so that we can more fully and adequately that's our best protection against absolutely everything out there. If
Yeah.
we want national security, that's the very best way to have national security.
Wow. Thank you for saying that.
Hey, Dr. Williams, I
So,
got a question just real quick. Let's say you're a homesteader type person and you were talking about how to integrate the orchard and some crops and the cattle and everything. Does that just mean like you could fence in a little area and then at least the cows are grazing? Or are you just talking about like wide open, just let the cows go wherever they're going to go? Um, yeah.
Unstuck Coaches hates it when movement and progress in a person's life or business is stuck, or frozen, or slowed, or just stopped altogether. Well, we have found a solution. Unstuckcoaches.com. They offer a variety of coaching services to get you or your business moving again. Check out unstuckcoaches.com.
Okay, so very good question. And no, we're not talking about just turning them loose and let them go wherever they want to go, because that's not how livestock were managed even in biblical days. They were shepherded, always shepherded, right?
Yeah.
And they were moved daily, every day. The shepherds moved every species of livestock that they were shepherding, they moved them every single day. And every single day they were observing, they were paying attention to the impact of those sheep, those cattle, those camels, those horses, everything else. They were paying attention to their impact on that landscape and making sure they didn't over impact the landscape. And then they were moving them again to yet another fresh location the next day. So we need to mimic that in what we do. Now we can mimic that today through the use of temporary fencing, like single strand polywire and things, electrified fencing that makes it easy to be able to move every day. But we still have to observe that impact and make sure we're not over impacting, right?
Mm.
And make sure we're giving them enough acreage every day. Um, Another way that we can more easily do it today because of technology development are the collars. You know, just so we have fenceless technology, just like we have for the dogs. You can put up a invisible fence around your yard and put a collar on your
Mhm.
dog and keep your dog in, right? We do the same thing with cattle and sheep and goats today.
Oh
We
wow.
can we can collar them and keep them in, and then build, quote, invisible paddocks every day, fenceless paddocks that the animals move into every day. So, we have these technologies that make this much easier for us rather than having to have the shepherd out there with them 24/7, as we used to. And if you think about virtually everybody, particularly in the Old Testament, that God used in a mighty way, and just start naming them off. Job, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, David, and we can keep naming, right? Noah, Moses. What were they all at one point in their life? Shepherds,
Yeah.
shepherds.
Yep.
They learned about God's world, about his creation, and how to steward that creation because they were shepherds.
Mm.
God called shepherds to do the mightiest things. Because
Wow.
if they learned how to be a good steward there, God could trust them to be a good steward with what he was yet to task them with.
That's amazing. He calls himself the great shepherd. I mean, Jesus, like.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, so let's get into just a little bit of. I know I can't keep you forever, which I wish I could. Um, let's get into some low hanging fruit from
Mhm.
a ag producer, rancher, landowner, farmer, orchard that they can try to start with to start building, the life in the soil, which will change everything. And then I want to talk about some common objections that you probably hear from people. But what's some like, here's us sitting there, we have a farm, we're tired. You don't have to argue with like, we know the problems, we know how hard it is, we know the inputs. What's some low hanging fruit? How do I even start?
Yeah.
And I
So,
know you
so
mentioned education, but
yep, yeah. So education is the first step, and and the next step is, of course, we do a lot of workshops and things like that in schools and everything else that people can avail themselves of. But the next step is getting somebody from our team actually out on your farm,
okay,
so that we can work with you within your very specific context.
yeah,
Um, Now, in terms of what you can do, if you're a livestock operation, so one of the first things we're going to help you do is evaluate your current infrastructure, your fencing and your water, because those are the two most important things with livestock, fencing and water. And when I say water, water for them to drink, right?
yeah,
Water is often a key limiting factor in a lot of livestock operations. And so we help you to resolve that and to economically and feasibly solve that problem so that you can get more water out there in a very valuable and economically feasible way.
yeah,
The transition if you do this transition right, it doesn't cost a bunch of money. As a matter of fact, the vast majority of farmers and ranchers that we work with in year one, actually make more net profit
Wow.
they've been making before. They may not increase their gross, but they absolutely increase their net, and we keep improving from there. And
But that's money in your pocket. Like that's a huge win. Like
yes,
that's the real money. Yeah.
it's the real money. Gross is meaningless.
Right.
If everybody else is taking my gross, so what?
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
You
At least we
know?
know net.
Right. It's what I can put in my bank account and use to support my family that matters. And so even in year one, in the very beginning of their transition, we can help them to be able to improve their net margins. Uh, there's basically three principal barriers to adoption, and we help them resolve these three barriers. Number one is lack of awareness of or education.
Mm.
Okay, you got to know it to implement it. So we help solve that by educating them. Number two is peer pressure. This is very, very real in agriculture.
Oh man, yeah.
Yeah, and this is very real globally. Okay, and so we help them resolve the peer pressure problem by providing them with a new peer-to-peer network and mentorship. Okay, what do we do with a new Christian, right? If
Yeah, we
they've been
disciple them.
running with a bad crowd, we help provide them with a new crowd,
Yeah.
right? Those peers. So we
Because
do the
will they
same
get
thing here.
pushback from fellow farmers and neighbor farmers and all this? Like, well, you're
Oh
not
yeah,
doing any of this
oh
inputs.
yeah,
Now you're doing this.
oh yeah,
Oh, darn.
oh yeah, and it can be bad. Okay, that's why you've got to have the peer network because you're going to need people. You're going to need the peers. You're going to need the mentors to help you through those challenging times when neighbors, friends, and even other family members
Yeah.
are telling you you're an idiot. Why are
You're
you doing
stupid.
this?
Yeah. Oh
Right.
man.
And unfortunately, that peer pressure can even come from your lender, our universities, our extension service, and everybody that sells you stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. So you get hit with this peer pressure from all sides, right? And so you've got to have that peer to peer and mentorship network to help you get through that. And the third principal barrier is debt load. And debt's ironic and insidious. It's ironic in that if what you were doing really works, you would not have the debt,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And so at that point in time, you most need to make a change because you're in debt. But yet you're very fearful of making a change because you feel like if I change something and it doesn't work, I'm so far in debt, now I'm bankrupt, right? So debt keeps you ensnared in debt. And so we immediately begin to work with them on this debt issue and paring that down and identifying debt that they absolutely do not need. And the vast majority of farmers and ranchers do have debt they don't need.
Yeah.
So we immediately begin to help them with that and to alleviate that debt issue.
Oh, I imagine there's a couple quick quick things that could be done to really fill some breathing room.
Most
I mean,
people
once you
have too
start
much
looking at
heavy
it.
metal,
Mm, yeah.
okay, too much equipment.
Yeah.
So that's number one. We help them identify equipment they no longer need.
Yeah.
And then that can be sold to pay down debt and to service interest.
Oh yeah. It feels good even hearing you talk. I mean, I can imagine like some of the freedom that would come with some of this, taking some of these things. So that's really good. That's really helpful because you're really working on the business of it too, because these guys can't just
Mhm.
drop a turn without. So, where does it go from there? So then you start learning how to steward the land well, which will benefit the soil, which will um make more net income for them as well, plus the soil and the land and the environment around as well. Like, hmm,
Yeah. So we help them identify their economic and financial pinch points and constraints and even appropriate enterprises. A lot of times they may be trying to do enterprises that just aren't making the money. And when there's far better enterprises, agricultural enterprises they can do on that land. So we help them to identify appropriate enterprises. We have developed enterprise decision calculators for that purpose.
Yeah.
So we're able to use these decision calculators, sit down with them and say, okay, let's analyze your current, let's say you're doing cow-calf or whatever, let's analyze this and see where you're at versus other enterprise options. So we'll run them through real life scenarios, real life numbers to be able to make these decisions. Um, the other thing that we do is we show them very simple tools and tests they themselves can do on farm to be able to monitor and track their progress. Like the shovel test, using a refractometer to measure plant bricks, water infiltration test, a thermometer to measure soil temperature. All of these things help them to be able to monitor and track their own progress and to see if they are, progressing and what they're doing. So we equip them with simple tools that they can use. We equip them with the knowledge. We equip them with enterprise decision calculators. And we help them even be able to go to lenders, with solid numbers to be able to get better debt structured. All of this, we help them restructure debt if they need to. And we help them figure out their marketing, because marketing is critical here as well. So all of those things are things that we help them with and to show them how to feasibly reorient their operations so that they can be viable, profitable, and they can radically improve their quality of life.
Wow. So have you seen some farms and producers and these ranchers and guys like turn their operation around successfully and have just some pretty really good wins and not like a super long time period?
Yeah, over and over again. Otherwise, we wouldn't still be doing this,
Yeah.
right? The reason that we do have, the number of farmer and rancher clients that we do and that we travel so extensively is because it does work and
Yeah.
it works rather well. And so what it initially took me 20 years to do because I had to learn, I had to make all the mistakes. 20 years of progress, we have now been able to boil down to three. So, what it took me 20 years to accomplish, we can now help clients achieve it in just 3 years on their own individual farms and ranches. And a large part of that, quite honestly, is the understanding of the life that was placed here and how to appropriately and quickly tap back into that life and restore that life. That's the key. Restoration of life is the key to this quick turnaround. So yes, in 3 years, we can have farms and ranches operating significantly better than they were and significantly more profitable than they were, prior to
All the
being.
while restoring the life in the
Yes,
soil.
yes.
Wow. Okay, so if I want to do a little bit further study, and we'll link up to how to reach you, because if I'm a ag producer, and I can possibly shed a little bit of debt, make more net profit, and restore the life of my soil, like I'm pretty interested in that in a really big way, especially if I can do it within a few year period and really see some progress pretty quick. What are some good resources for my further education in this?
So we have quite a few resources on the website and we're constantly adding to it. But libertas-land.com, and we've got
Okay,
articles and we're always writing new articles. We're going to be posting podcasts there, a whole host of other
okay,
things. Um, you can also, we've worked heavily with Peter Bick and his team at Roots So Deep,
okay,
and you can go to rootsodeep.org. We've got a number of peer-reviewed and published articles there.
okay.
That people can access. And there's the Roots So Deep docu-series
Okay.
that I would heavily encourage people to watch. They can just go to rootsodeep.org, to access and stream that docu-series. It's a four-part docu-series. We also have the Carbon Cowboys docu-series. I think we've got 14 of those films out now, and people can just Google Carbon Cowboys. That's all they
Okay.
need to do, and they can access those. Our good friend, Dr. Jonathan Lundgren
Mhm.
at Ecdysis Foundation, ECDYSIS. They can just Google Ecdysis or ecdysis.org.
Okay.
And Dr. Lundgren has what's called the Thousand Farms Project, and they've got dozens of peer-reviewed articles published on the benefits of regenerative agriculture there as well. So those are a handful of excellent resources that there's others also, but though that's a great place for people to get started in learning about regenerative agriculture. So you can watch these docu-series, you can read the articles, you can listen to the podcast, and all of those. Another really good podcast, particularly for livestock, that we've done a lot of podcasts on is Clay Connery's Working Cows
Okay.
podcast. So if people want to hear some pretty detailed information relative to a lot of what we've talked about, you can find that in the archives of the Working Cows podcast. Um, so all of
Okay.
those are places that people can go to begin to learn more. Uh, Now, but again, that's your beginning. The
Mhm.
real deal is actually doing it, right?
Right.
And that's
Yeah.
where, the workshops and then the on-farm consulting comes into play
Yeah.
because it does have to be contextual or individualized for you
Yeah.
to be most successful with it.
That makes sense. And why? Yeah. I mean, you have so many years of experience that you can boil it down. I mean, for me, if I'm a producer, I'm latching on to people like you. Just like help me. I'm in. I'm ready to go. Like, yeah, reach out and we'll link this stuff up, and that's super helpful. I'm so grateful. I guess the one of the final questions I have is if you had to give us just a statement of hope on some things you guys are seeing, just for land that, because I think you can look out there and just be completely hopeless. What are some really cool things you've been seeing? I mean, all across America and maybe even the world with this that you're seeing restoration and things happen. And then just give us some encouragement as we land the episode.
So, a lot of really good things that we see as examples. We are often able within the first 3 to 4 years to be able to reduce input cost 40 to 50%, or even
Wow.
better at times. So that's significant. You know, um, we're able to, within that first 3 to 4 years, significantly increase productivity. If it's a grazing operation, a ranching operation, we often see carrying capacity increase 1.5 to 2 times,
Wow.
on the same acres. Um, we have been able to go in and restore desert.
Oh
So
my.
taking land that is just, you know, basically abject poverty, so to speak, and restore vibrant growth to it. So regreening of the desert just through very simple tools and the utilization of livestock. Um, and we've seen people's lives change. They go from being depressed and anxious and even at times suicidal to just a radical improvement in quality of life and enjoyment of what they're doing. You know, Agriculture should be among the most noblest of professions and the most satisfying of professions, but today we have turned it into one of the most challenging and stressful professions out there. And that is not how God intended it to be. And in agriculture, we're among the top three of all professions for suicide rates.
Oh, wow.
Why? You just have
Yeah.
why? Why is that happening? You know, so we've been able to restore people,
Wow.
and to me that's what's important. And to watch them change in front of you
Oh.
as they realize the abundance of God's world is still here,
Mm.
and they realize that they are becoming truly a steward of this creation. There's nothing more satisfying that you can do, and to just witness those transformations in people is amazing, and to witness the corresponding transformation of the land along with it, and all of the other life that God created. And then I will say this in terms of everybody, okay, whether you're a farmer or not, we all benefit because when we steward the land well, then our weather gets better,
Mm.
our food gets better, our environment gets better, everything gets better. And in the work that we've been doing with Dr. Stefan Van Vliet and his team of researchers at Utah State University, looking at phytonutrient analysis
Mm.
of these foods, what we have discovered is that foods produced regeneratively are anywhere from 50% to over 600% better in nutrient density and phytonutrient profile than foods that are produced conventionally. Okay. Wrap your head around that one. If we want to improve
500%.
our health, we want to get ourselves off all the meds and
Mm.
everything else, you know, that's how we need to be doing it. I'm going to challenge every consumer here, guys. Okay. So you're a Christian and not a farmer. Okay. Does that relieve you of stewardship of the land responsibility? Not at all. Not at all. You still have a direct responsibility to steward the land. Now, you don't own land, so how can you do that? And how can you participate in stewardship of the land? Well, by using your food purchase dollars
Mm.
to support and buy regeneratively produced foods. Okay. Number one, that's being a good steward, okay, of the monies that God has blessed you with. Number two, you're supporting agriculture the way God intended it to be, which is also being a good steward. Okay. Number three, you are now stewarding yourself and your family by putting good, truly healthy food into your bodies. Sick people cannot serve God well.
Right. Yep.
They cannot serve God well. We can only serve God well when we're healthy. We can be healthy so that we can serve Him well by eating phytonutrient rich foods produced on regenerative farms. So, every one of you out there that is not a farmer, which is 99% of you now here in the US, but you are a Christian and you want to be a good steward, you have a direct obligation and
Mm.
responsibility to stop putting highly processed crap foods into your
Mm.
body and the bodies of your children and grandchildren,
Mm.
and to start supporting good stewardship by buying regeneratively produced foods from regenerative farms. That's
Mm.
the bottom line, folks.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. And let me just ask a quick follow-up to that. How do people, I mean, you can just search the term, but how do you, if you don't know any farms just off the top of your head, how do you go about finding somebody close to you that you might can support and do that? Because there's probably a lot of people who want to do that.
Yeah.
I mean,
First
just
thing I
besides
would
like
say,
Google searches, but
yeah, contact us, guys,
okay.
and let
Oh,
us know
good
where
point.
you live, and we'll help you. We'll help
Okay.
you do this. We are actively in the process of developing you know, a website specific for this
Okay.
to help consumers find good food so that they know which farms to trust.
Yeah.
And that will be coming out, in the next
Okay.
year or so. But in the
Perfect.
meantime, just give us a shout through our website or whatever, and we'll be very happy once we know where you live to direct you to farms that you can trust.
Perfect. Dr. Williams, thank you so much. Please hit me up next time you're around Stephenville, Fort Worth, or Metroplex. I'll let you walk around the orchard and give me some advice. Hey, we'll link to everything on there, and guys and gals, reach out to Dr. Williams and his team, and let's see the amazing things that God has in store for you and your production and your land. So thank you so much, Dr. Williams. Really appreciate it.
Thank you both for the opportunity. I'm honored, and I really appreciate what y'all do, because what you do is critically important as well. Being able to get the word out to people and educate people, you're a core component of that. So thank y'all.
We really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Bless you.
Thank you for joining us on this latest edition to the StoryField podcast. We hope that you have been challenged, inspired, and ready to take that next step, whatever that is. If you know someone with an amazing story that needs to be heard, send us an email at info@thestoryfield.com. Have a fantastic day, and we can't wait for you to join us on the next episode of The StoryField.